Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry I kept you a little bit longer than I said for that break. We had a couple things come up that we had to deal with before the state presents its closing. All right, you ready?
Yes, Your Honor. Proceed.
Absolutely.
This badge is supposed to stand for something. It's supposed to stand for the obligation somebody takes to serve and to protect their community. Every officer takes that sworn statement. It's on the side of police cars. They are to serve and to protect. That flag, the United States flag, means something. When somebody in the National Guard takes an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States and the laws of our country and the laws of the state of Georgia, it means something. But to the defendant, it meant nothing. He took those oaths, and as you've seen through the trial, violated them time and time again. He didn't serve. He didn't protect. He abused. He took his power, he took his badge, and he used that to violate the law. He used that to murder. He is a cop-turned-killer. I told you in the opening, there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. I am certain that the defendant hoped this would never come to light. Hoped that nobody would ever find his gun laying in the woods next to Susanna's murdered body. But the reality is it has come to light. And he faces justice now. Despite having hidden, covered up, lied, stolen, he faces justice now before you. Let's straight went over some of the law. The judge is going to give you this document. This document is 21 pages of the law. It's going to charge you about every area of the law that you should consider. Ms. Drake went over several of those. And I want to point out a few that I think are important. I don't want to spend a lot of time on them because you're going to have them. You have a copy of them, each of you will. You'll be able to read them exactly and precisely for yourself. But there are a few tenets of the law that form and frame how trials happen, how you should consider the evidence in this case, what your obligations and responsibilities are. The charges in the indictment, malice murder. What does it mean? What is malice murder? We oftentimes, in Georgia, we have a unique system. We have two different charges for murder. It's malice murder and felony murder. In other states, you may hear first or second or third degree murder or premeditated murder. Those don't exist in Georgia. There are just two. It's malice murder and felony murder. And both of them are charged in this case. And I think it's important for you to understand what those mean and what the elements are. Here it says, and you'll have this charge in the jury room, it says exactly this, that it requires that you find the defendant caused the death of Susanna Morales. He did so unlawfully and with malice aforethought. Right? That's a legal phrase. It's in the law and it's in the statute. It says malice aforethought. But what is that? What is malice? This is what it is. It's when someone acted with deliberate intention to unlawfully take the life of another person. You'll read in there, it's not premeditation. It doesn't mean that this had to be months or weeks or days or even hours of premeditation. It means it can happen in a moment. But it has to be intentional. Right? And that's what malice means. You're going to get the full charge in there and you can read it. In this case, we believe that the defendant acted with malice, that he intentionally took and snatched the life of Susanna Morales on July 26th of 2022. There is felony murder. Felony murder happens when somebody causes the death of another person while committing a felony. And it doesn't require malice. You don't have to find that he intentionally did it. It could be accidental in felony murder. It could be an accident. I didn't mean to kill her, but in the commission of a felony, she died. That's the definition of felony murder. It's charged in all kinds of instances. In this case, it is charged that he kidnapped Susana Morales. We're going to get to the facts. Ms. Drake brought up that there's no evidence of kidnapping. And I strongly disagree. And I will show you exactly what that evidence is. But the felony that the state has alleged is that the defendant was committing kidnapping. He took Susana. He took her, he threw her phone out of the car, and then ultimately drove her all the way to Tequila, and where he killed and dropped her body. That is kidnapping. And if in that process of kidnapping her, she dies, that's felony murder. That's the definition. Kidnapping means to abduct or steal away Susana without his authority. Without his authority, without lawful authority. Not using a badge, he didn't arrest her. There's no police report. He didn't arrest her or lawfully take her with his badge as a police officer. Unlawfully, without authority, took Susana Morales, held her against her will, and it caused any sort of bodily injury. It could be a scratch. In this case, it's her death. Attempted rape. Rape is a pretty obvious crime and what it means. It means to forcibly have sex with a man, forcibly raping and having sex with a woman against her will. Right? And there's a charge on it in there, the full definition of what rape is. What is attempted rape? What means you attempted to do that? We don't have to prove, and we're not alleging that he followed through, that he actually did. And as we'll get into it here, the reason we didn't allege that is that over the passage of 196 days, Susana's body completely deteriorated. She was 100% skeletal. Couldn't recover semen. You can't recover forensic evidence of that nature on a body that's completely skeletal. And so there is no way to prove that he actually raped her. The charge is attempted rape. And what attempt means is that you have to commit some sort of substantial step to further the crime. Right? I can't just think about it. It's not just a thought crime that he wanted to rape her or that he thought about raping her. That's not enough. Attempted rape means he took a step towards doing it. And here, the step is that he kidnapped her. And as we'll go over here in just a little bit, her body is found completely naked. No clothes whatsoever on her body. And lastly, false report of a crime. This requires that he willfully and knowingly made a false report of theft to Officer Merkley with the Gwinnett County Police Department. Ms. Drake told you he's guilty of that. Right? That might be the easiest obligation you have, but it's significant that she said it. Right? We're going to watch portions of his interview. You're going to get to see here in just a second again what he said. But he lied. Repeatedly. Over and over and over and over again to detectives. Not just one detective, not just two detectives, not three, 4 detectives. Lied for 3.5 hours about, I didn't drop the gun. It was taken. I promise. I wouldn't lie to you. What you will see at the end of this case is that the defendant doesn't know how to tell the truth. Everything he says is a lie. Everything in the interview he said is a lie. And if he's lying about that, ask yourself, why is Ms. Drake admitting that, but not admitting the other stuff? There's a charge on reasonable doubt. This encapsulates this entire process. Reasonable doubt. The state's burden, as Ms. Drake pointed out, in every criminal case, whether it's shoplifting or murder, is that we have to prove the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Right? It's such a common phrase that it's ingrained into most of our minds, and in our daily lives we hear that phrase. And oftentimes we misconstrue that phrase. What does it actually mean? Oftentimes, we use it in common vernacular and daily life to mean that we got to be positive, right? We've got to be 100% sure and certain of things. But that's not what it means, right? And in fact, who's really 100% certain of anything in life, right? There's an old adage, the only thing certain is death and taxes, right? But even that is somewhat of a joke, right? Being 100% certain of anything in life, am I 100% certain that after this I'm probably going to go eat? No. I would like to think that maybe I will, but I'm not 100% certain of that. And the reality is we're not 100% certain of almost anything in life. That's not what reasonable doubt means. What it means is a doubt based upon common sense and reason. You're going to get the full charge. You can read it. It is, as was previously stated, a doubt of a fair-minded, impartial juror honestly seeking the truth. Right? But a phrase that is very important here is common sense. I'm going to explain to you why that's important. It also means not beyond all doubt. It doesn't mean that you have to go back into that jury room and convince yourself beyond every single doubt of the defendant's guilt. That's not what reasonable doubt means. You are authorized to convict him even if you have a doubt. That's what the law is. It's a reasonable doubt. And we're going to talk about that. It's not a mathematical certainty. I do not have to foreclose every other possibility, as Ms. Drake said. You are not searching for doubt. Ms. Drake brought this up at the end of her closing. That is not the job of a juror, to go and search and come up with wild theories that could possibly be true. Right? That's not the job of a juror. Right? As you go back there, if you have reasonable doubts, ones that make sense based on your own common sense, those are reasonable doubts. And it's not vague or arbitrary. It means, and those are legal phrases that we use, but what that means, and you're going to see it in the charge, it means that it can't be something that's just, I can't place my finger on it, but it just seems like maybe there's a doubt, I don't know. It has to be something concrete that you point at with common sense and reason and arrive at. And the point here is that it is based on your common sense. You're going to read that in the charge. Why is that? Because in our jury system, we ask jurors to decide cases for which they've never heard about or seen about, and based on evidence presented solely here in the courtroom. And how do you do that as a juror? Well, you don't walk through that door or that door and check your brain at the door. You are expected. We asked you to be on this jury. We selected you to be on the jury because you each carry with you your own life experiences and common sense, and you are to employ those in the reasoning and resolution of this case. I like to explain reasonable doubt this way. I look at this photograph and I ask, what made these tracks? Is it reasonable to think that a dog walking on the beach made these tracks? Yes, that's reasonable. And why is that reasonable? It's reasonable because I have life experience, and I have common sense, and I have a dog, and I've been to the beach, and I've seen a dog walk on the beach. And in my life, I've watched dogs walk on the beach. And I've seen what happens when a dog walks on the beach. And I've seen the paw prints that a dog leaves on the beach. That's reasonable for me to conclude that a dog made this. But let me ask you, is it possible something else did it? Yeah, sure. It's possible that before I took this photograph, I came along with a fake dog leg and stamped dog prints in the sand as I walked along and then took this photograph. That's possible. But is that reasonable? When you see this photograph in your common sense, what's the first thing that comes into your mind? It's that a dog was walking on the beach and left these prints. And you arrive at that conclusion because it's common sense. In much the same way, my children, who made this mess? I am certain that my children would love for me to believe that they didn't make this mess, right? That instead, maybe burglars broke into my house and went up into my son and my daughter's room, messed everything up, and nothing else in the house. They only messed up there. Maybe my children would like me to believe that, right? But is that reasonable? Well, the answer is no. right? And why? Because I know my children. And I know what children do. And I know that when I walk into my kids' room and I see a mess, I can conclude my children did it. Right? I wasn't there when it happened. I don't have cameras in their room. I don't have a witness who's going to come and tell me, hey, your son messed up his room. Right? But I reach reasonable conclusions based on my own common sense. Is it possible somebody else did it? Sure. It's possible somebody broke into my home and messed their room up and left and messed up nothing else. But that's not reasonable. Right? And that's what reasonable doubt is. When you're in the back, are there other theories? Are there other things that Miss Drake would like for you to believe happened here? Sure, there are other things that she has posited out there, that she has said. None of them are reasonable. You're going to get some charges on evidence, right? What type of evidence? What can we consider? What can we not consider? Those types of things. There are two types of evidence that you commonly hear. Ms. Drake has talked about some of them: direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. Now, if you ask 9 out of 10 people, tell me what circumstantial evidence means, everybody will discount it. Right? Oh, that's circumstantial. Completely circumstantial. You can't believe or conclude anything because the evidence is all circumstantial. And I imagine, like me, you may have heard that. You may even have that strongly held belief that that's what it means. But it is entirely something different. In the legal context in the courtroom, that's not what it means. Direct evidence is evidence that can be seen or heard or otherwise directly sensed, such as by smell, taste, or touch. Also hearing. So, things that you've heard in the courtroom, such as witness testimony, the exhibits that you'll have in the back, all of these photographs, you've got the discs, there's physical evidence, the defendant's gun left at the scene. That is all direct evidence, and you are authorized to consider it. Right? You should consider direct evidence. Right? It makes sense. You've seen it. Witnesses have testified about it. That's the stuff that you look at and you consider. But you also consider circumstantial evidence. Well, what does this mean? Circumstantial evidence is the proof of facts or circumstances by direct evidence, from which you may infer other related or connected facts that are reasonable and justified in light of your experience. This goes back to the photographs I showed you. I've got direct evidence. In that photograph of the dog prints on the beach, I got direct evidence. I got the photograph, right? But I want to know what caused it. Well, how do I reach that conclusion? It's based on circumstantial evidence. My own experience leads me to believe in reasonable and justified ways that the dog did it. In much the same way my children in their room. I've got direct evidence of the mess. I've got direct evidence of the toys everywhere. But I've got no video footage or proof. Well, how could anybody arrive at a conclusion if we have to have video of every single thing? Right? That's never required. Right? It's never required to have video. Certainly, it would have been wonderful to have the whole thing on video. But with my kids, much like this case, I can use my reasoning and reach that conclusion based on circumstantial evidence. Ms. Drake cited to you a charge, and it said that to authorize a conviction on circumstantial evidence alone, the state's theory of guilt, the state's evidence, I have to disprove every other reasonable theory. And that's a charge that you're going to read. It's in there, and it says that. What the charge means, and what Ms. Drake did not tell you, is that situation applies only where the only evidence presented is circumstantial evidence. But that's not the case here. You have direct evidence to consider. You have all of the exhibits. You have your recollection of what every witness said and the notes that you took to help you with that recollection. That's direct evidence. That, in conjunction with the circumstantial evidence, you are authorized to consider all of it. The direct evidence, the circumstantial evidence, and arrive at reasonable conclusions based upon that. I utilize this as an example. This is direct evidence. I don't need much more to know that the dog chewed up the pillow. He is actively, currently in the process of doing it. But how does that change whenever I find this? Right? I don't have a photograph of the dog chewing up the stuff. But I do have some direct evidence. I've got the mess. And I've got circumstantial evidence, which are my reasonable inferences from that evidence. What does all of this mean for you? What it means is that you use your common sense. That's all we're asking you to do. And I hope that as you walked in here and sat down for the first time and started hearing this evidence, that all of this that you heard makes sense. This is common sense, what happened here. We don't have to go hunting for Bigfoot in the woods here. This is obvious of what happened to Susana Morales. You will use your common sense. But there are some strategies that the defense has used in this case to try to mislead you, to try and lead you astray. There's a quote, "They muddy the waters to make it seem deep." All right, what does that mean? Well, if you've ever seen a stream, if you've ever seen a creek bed or a river, oftentimes that water can be very clear and you can see all the way to the bottom. You know just how deep it is, and you know what's on the bottom of that. You know what lurks beneath the surface. You can see it. But muddying the waters, what happens when somebody comes in and takes a stick and stirs everything up so that you can't see, or so that it doesn't appear clear to you. And it's distraction. It's taking your focus off of what's important in the case and coming up with random theories and conjecture that makes no sense in light of this case and in context. There's another defense strategy. This is a red herring. And we may have heard that phrase in psychology or in human reasoning and thinking. What is a red herring? What's an actual fish? Red herring is a fish. And where did this phrase come from? When, back in the day, hunters would use hunting dogs to track animals. Foxes, deer, whatever they were hunting, they would use hunting dogs. And oftentimes, in order to train the dogs, hunters would take a red herring fish and they would run it across the scent trail of the animal they were tracking. The whole point of that was to train the dog to ignore the scent of the red herring, because dogs, they pick up on scent, and they would follow the red herring trail, and they would not follow the right trail to what they were hunting. Right? And that's where the phrase came from. What it is the injection of irrelevant or unsupported facts, in this case, by the defense, that is meant to take you off the path, out of the hunt. It is meant to take you down some side path that makes no sense and hopefully distract you from the truth in this case. For instance, in this case, a focus on synovia. That's a red herring. You'll hear again here in a moment, but you already heard from the defendant in his interview. She had nothing to do with it. Her phone records and his phone records, she's in Doraville and down at Peachtree Corners while he is out at the scene with her body. There's no questioning of synovia on the stand whatsoever about, did you do this? Were you involved? Did you kill her? The defendant told you in his interview she had nothing to do with it. She didn't kill Susana. But it's a red herring, right? If we can distract you, if we can take you off course to something that doesn't matter, that's just not an issue in the case. Another one, and this is a big one. Drugs. What testimony did you hear about drugs? You heard that Susana liked to smoke marijuana. And she smoked marijuana. You heard the testimony in the case that she had tried a pill one time and wrote about it in her journal and said she didn't like it. And she told Axel, her boyfriend, it made me feel disgusted with myself. That is the evidence of drugs. The rest of this about maybe she overdosed, maybe she died that way, is a complete red herring, unsupported by any evidence in the case. Not a single person told you that she overdosed. Not a single person told you that she even had other drugs that night. or any night other than one time months and months before that incident. That's a red herring. But these are the defense strategies. And the reality is, when the evidence in the case is so overwhelming, when it points so dramatically to one conclusion, to one person, the defendant, Miles Bryant, as being the only person involved and responsible for Susanna's death, what other choice does she have? What other choice is there than to throw out possibilities and theories that have absolutely no support? There is no other evidence. There is no other support and no other conclusion that you can reach, and we'll get to that. I want to take you through a timeline of Susanna's murder. What we know about the timeline is that around 7 p.m. she left for Kelly's house. Right? How do we know that? Well, her mother, Maria, when she took the stand and said she left, she said 6 o'clock. That was what she said. But the phone records very clearly. She said, I called her about 10 or 15 minutes later after she left to make sure she had gotten to Esmeralda's house. And we all know she didn't go to Esmeralda's house. She went to Kelly's house. But she called her 10 or 15 minutes later. Well, that's at 7:17 p.m. Mom called her at 7:17. You heard that evidence, right? You got to see Investigator Wilbanks map out for you that exact call as it came in at 7:17 p.m. And what it showed very clearly is that she's not at Kelly's house at that time. She's not over at Alyssa's house. She's in the area here of Singleton Road, where Investigator Wilbanks told you would be consistent with her walking down Singleton Road to go to the apartment complex. Right? That's at 7:17 p.m. From 7:28 to 9:58 p.m., we know that based on her Life 360, she is at the apartment complex. And she's with Kelly. And she's with Alyssa. And they're hanging out. They told you she was there with us. Right? Nobody's got exact times. Nobody was putting their stopwatch on. I started my stopwatch when I started talking just so I know how long I'm talking, but nobody does that in real life. They gave you an estimate of how long they thought they hung out, right? Around 10 o'clock she went home, right? 9:30 to 10, I think is what they said, is what Kelly said. 9:30 to 10 o'clock, somewhere in that time frame. I walked her to the end of the neighborhood, and that's when she went home, right? And that's consistent with her Life 360. That shows her there. We have at this point 9:58 to 10:07. It shows this trip of her walking home, right? And it's at 9:58 to 10:07. What is, and we'll get to it here in a minute, but what is really interesting is, as Investigator Wilbanks talked to you about, this is based on cellular networks. It's based on when your phone picks it up, when it doesn't pick it up, but it shows several different points on here that are relevant, including that she's on Singleton Road, and then she is on Santa Ana Drive, which is where she lives. She is steps away from her home. She is steps away from being home. You saw this. I'm just going to turn the sound on the laptop real quick. But you saw that. Next, what we know is that sometime during that period of time, she disappears. How do we know that? How do we know she disappeared? There's not a single phone call. There's not a single text message. There's not a single social media post, not a comment, not a message to any friends, not reaching out to anyone ever again. The last visible or physical or electronic trace of Susanna's life is as she's walking past King David County. That's it. After that, there is virtually no trace of her ever until she's found in the woods. It shows she made it back to Santa Ana Drive. She is literally, Kelly and Alyssa told you, the end of that night, they had a great night. There were no problems. There were no issues. She was walking home. She wanted to go home. They were all going to bed. There was no discussion of her going anywhere else. There was no discussion of her doing anything else other than going home. And in a particularly tender moment, they said, we thought we were going to see her the next day. We thought that we were going to hang out the next day. She made it all the way back to her road before something happened to her. Before she immediately changes directions and ends up back in the defendant's own apartment complex. Well, listen, Kelly told you, they didn't see her the rest of the night. The Detective Carter told you, she knows no one else in the apartment complex. She has no other connections in that apartment complex. There is absolutely no reason that she would voluntarily go back to that apartment complex. There's no prior messages. There are no prior phone calls. There are no prior social media messages. The lifeblood of a teenage girl in communicating with friends and people who she knows. There's nothing ever in her lifetime connecting her to that apartment other than Alyssa and Kelly. But yet, and here's what's interesting. This trip is a 9-minute trip. 9:58 to 10:07. There is an impossibility for her to get from Santa Ana Drive back to here in that period of time without a car. You saw her walking all the way to Santa Ana. We know she walked to Santa Ana Drive. We know she passed the King David Academy because she's walking. But then almost in an instantaneous moment, she is back in Windscape Village Lane Apartments, the Sterling Glen Apartments where the defendant lives, where he not testified, but said to the detectives in the interview, he would post up all the time. He'd sit there in his truck and he'd monitor what's going on at the exits and the parking lots. And he sits there. And she gets back there. It's impossible walking. Plus, there's no other camera footage. You heard, they reviewed all the camera footage. She didn't walk back past King David Academy. She didn't voluntarily walk back to the apartment complex. But she ends up there. At 10:20, Miss Briggs said, what happened between 10:21 and 10:29? We absolutely know. I absolutely know. Because we have the images of exactly what happened. She is traveling at 40 miles an hour down Singleton and Steve Reynolds Boulevard before there is a crash alert at the Oak Lock Trace neighborhood. That's exactly what happened. Her phone is traveling at 40 miles an hour. And you don't have to have any specialized training or knowledge to understand the human being can't walk or run that fast. She is in a moving vehicle. You heard testimony from Detective Carter, who has significant experience and understanding of Life 360. You don't get a crash alert by dropping your phone. Everybody told you that. We've dropped our phone. Nobody's ever gotten a crash alert. You don't get a crash alert by braking hard. There were no accidents that time.
Objection, Your Honor. I believe that is misstating the evidence. You can get a crash alert from hard brake. Detective Carter testified to that.
Mayor, so what the testimony, the text message says it could be from any of those things. What the testimony, and I don't make up evidence, the testimony from the witnesses is that nobody has ever gotten a crash alert from hard braking.
That's my recollection.
But they also introduced the message itself, which says this could be from hard braking.
Yes.
Can I continue, Your Honor?
Absolutely.
The photograph here, and what's interesting about this, Detective Carter testified and told you that what appears to happen up here is a U-turn on Steve Reynolds Boulevard. I'm going to take you to the testimony of Synovia. She said, I saw the defendant coming back this way on Steve Reynolds Boulevard, and then he turned right here. And that's where she confronted him, right, about the vehicle. That's wholly consistent with him turning around, U-turning on Steve Reynolds Boulevard and coming back. But in any event, at that moment, Susanna's phone is thrown from the vehicle. There are no accidents. There are no, she didn't drop it. It doesn't happen. Detective Carter told you of significant importance. The only way you can get a crash alert is that your vehicle has to be traveling more than 25 miles an hour for at least 30 seconds. That's the rules from Life 360. I didn't make them up, they did. And that's what she testified to. So, if there are no accidents and there are no other incidents, her phone is thrown from the vehicle. How else do we know that? You're going to see here in a minute, phone records. Her phone never moved again. It stayed there, despite her body ending up 22 miles away. 16-year-old girl voluntarily throwing her phone out of the window because she doesn't want it, and then ending up dead? That doesn't make any sense. What makes sense is the defendant throwing her phone out of the vehicle. And how do we know that makes sense? Because Ms. Drake didn't mention it one time in her closing. That's what she doesn't want you to know. She doesn't want you to think about. No possible version of events that she is attempting to get you to believe can account for the defendant throwing Susana Morales' phone out of the window. It makes no sense. Why would he throw it out? Why would? It's murder. He doesn't want to be tracked. Those phones can be tracked, and we did. We tracked them, but her phone never moved. It stayed there through 76 missed calls from her mother and her sister and her friends and her boyfriend. And it rang, and it rang, and it rang. You heard another red herring in this case, another distraction tool, was that Ms. Drake questioned witnesses about the battery being dead. Right? There's no way that that could be where the phone remained because the battery's dead at 10:30. Well, you heard numerous expert witnesses testify to you that phone did not die at 10:30 p.m. It died after 6 a.m. And how do we know that? Because her phone records show call after call after call, logging and pinging off the same tower in the same sector, never moving again after 10:29 p.m. We do know that her phone was thrown at that time at 10:29. The crash alert that was received shows Susana at that location at 10:29 p.m. and her phone is never found again. It's never recovered. This is that area at Oak Lock Trace where that occurred. What's the next thing that happens? Right? There's not much else that happens that we have documented other than the defendant sending his mother text messages at 11:58 p.m. It's me. Mom told you she never saw him that night. No explanation as to why he sent that text message. I understand. We have a text message. That's the only other text message. That's the only other documented activity. Investigator Willis told you, I went through all his phone records. And for that period of time, now there were other phone records that showed him moving, if you recall the maps, showed him moving a little after midnight from Norcross up to Interstate 85, to Highway 316, past the airport in Lawrenceville, all the way driving out to Tequila, Georgia, 22 miles away from his house. At 12:52 a.m., it shows the defendant in the woods, exactly where Susana's body is located. By 12:52, he is in the woods in Tequila, Georgia, where his gun is recovered and Susana's body is found. We know he was there at least 6 minutes later because he's still pinging off the same tower at the same time, or 6 minutes later. Right? You'll recall his changing stories with Detective Carter. He initially said, I never went down to 316. I drove around the Norcross area. I didn't go down past Lawrenceville and Highway 316. And then they confronted him with his records. Oh, this does look bad. I did go down Highway 316. That's what he said. I did go down Highway 316. Yeah, I did drive down that way. And yeah, okay, so maybe my phone was around that area. But I just drove. I just drive everywhere. Right? And then you're there for an extended period of time. It's not just 6 minutes. You're in the exact same area. We're at 1:39 in the morning. So he's been there at this point for 47 minutes in the woods with Susana's body and with his gun. That's not it. That shows you right there. And you heard Detective Poppy. He goes, well, that's not it, right? That can't be, you can't just have been sitting there. Because we had Detective Carter testify and tell you how long were those calls that he was out on. There was only one of them lasted, it was less than 10 minutes. The other ones weren't even answered. So we got 47 minutes, he's on the phone with Zenobia for less than 10. In one of these 4 calls, right there, where her body's at. 1:46. We're now 7 minutes later. 1:46 in the morning, he's still there. We're almost an hour of him there in Tequila, Georgia, with her body, his gun, in the woods. Again, there at 1:46 a.m. And then the next morning, Detective Carter told you she didn't ask him about this because she didn't have these records yet in the interview. He went back. He went back. Mr. Drake told you. He lied completely about the gun. He lied about the gun. He lied about dropping the gun in the woods. And he lied about, he went back. She told you that just a moment ago, that he went back. I didn't need her to tell you that, because we already told you that. He went back at 9:35. And you don't have to doubt why he went back. She told you why he went back. She told you he went into the woods. So despite his repeated statements to the police that he had never gone in the woods, that he was never out of his truck, that he was only saw parked on the side of Highway 316, that he had nothing to do with this, complete fabrication. It's an absolute lie. Sergeant Jorstad said it best. That's a bold-faced lie. Everything you're saying is a bold-faced lie in that interview. Shows you here the next morning, back out there at 9:35. Well, what's significant about that? We'll talk to you about that in a moment. But I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about who she was. What you heard testimony of. Happy. Life of the party. Comic to her friends. 16-year-old girl. And in the prime of her life. She's just getting started. No connection to the defendant. Alyssa Marvin told you that as they were walking out of the apartment complex, the defendant offered them a ride, which they declined. She also told you that she, Alyssa, talked to the defendant at the pool and Susanna was there. That's it. She is present 2 times when the defendant shows up. That does not show a relationship. It does not show any communication between the 2 of them. It doesn't even show that she knew him, ever spoke to him, or talked to him, ever. In fact, Detective Carter went through her phone records, through the defendant's phone records, through the defendant's cell phones, through both of their social media accounts, not one single communication in history between the 2 of them. Ever. Ever. She didn't know him. He was a stranger. She had never interacted with him. There is no evidence, period, that she had ever interacted. In fact, there is evidence to the contrary. There's no communication. Somebody you interact with, somebody you're friends with, somebody you know you're talking to on the phone or through text messages or for probably most teenagers, social media. 0. She didn't know him. She had never spoken to him. There's no evidence of her ever even speaking to him. She is walking home from her friend's house. That's what she heard. Kelly and Alyssa told you everything was normal with her that night. And yes, she smoked marijuana. And according to the defense, apparently that's somehow justification for murder. That she's smoking marijuana, so she must be a troubled teenage girl. Straight to consider herself like most teenagers who smoke marijuana. That's all that happened that night with her. There's no evidence of her using anything else, of her taking anything else, of anything else ever other happening to her whatsoever in life. Her friends hoped to see her the next day, but when she left, despite communicating and talking and texting with her best friends on the planet, she never sent another message, ever. Not, hey, I'm going to go over here, or I'm going with this person, or this, or that, or anything. There are none on any platform, anywhere. And even if we thought, well, maybe somebody deleted them, they're on her phone records. There's no outgoing messages. There were no outgoing phone calls. She never called another person. She never texted another person or communicated with another human being other than the defendant that night. All of her friends said she would not get into the truck with someone she didn't know. The defendant, she did not know him. He is a stranger. He is what goes bump in the night. He is the one who uses his badge to prey upon innocent girls, which is what he did that night. She didn't know him, and everyone testified she's never gotten into the vehicle with anybody she didn't know. She's never done it. She would never do this. The people who know her best in life, her best friends, and she, as Morella testified, I told you, Rose, no, Alyssa, Kelly, she would not do this. She was in a happy relationship with Axel. He told you. I loved her, and I think she loved me back. They had been going out for a couple of months. Her friends told you she's not that kind of girl. She had no evidence that she would ever go just hook up with somebody else, somebody random, particularly somebody she did not know, that she had never spoken to and never communicated with in her entire life. But yet somehow she ends up completely naked in the woods a few hours later. She was going home. Their theory of something else happening makes absolutely no sense and isn't supported by a single shred of evidence. Not one thing that they can point to say, this is what she did. This is where she went. There's nothing. She was going home. The evidence that you heard in the case from her family and her friends, as we talked about, is that she was happy and healthy. She would not run away. Ms. Drake says, oh, she's run away. She's a deprived child, or she's just somebody who just runs away constantly. Her mother, her sister, all her friends told you that didn't happen. She didn't run away, right? Would she stay at friends' homes? Sure. But her mother always knew where she was. And her sister always knew where she was. Not one time in her 16 years of life has she ever not come home and not told anybody where she was. That's the kind of person Susanna was. Not some deviant pothead who was irresponsible and not talking to her mom and running off into the night with strangers. Despite whatever characterization the defense wants to make about her, that is not true. She always told everybody where she was. She didn't know the defendant. She wouldn't get into the truck with a stranger. She was on her way home. And that she had absolutely no reason to go back to the apartment complex that night. Not one. The Gwinnett Police, multiple detectives from the Special Victims Unit and the Gwinnett Homicide Unit told you about searching for her. Not a trace. Not anything about her whereabouts. Canvassing the Sterling Glen Apartments, nobody who ever saw her again. Nobody who ever saw her come back to the Sterling Glen Apartments that they found. Nobody who ever said she walked back to the apartments. None of her friends. She didn't text any of them, didn't call any of them to say, I've changed my mind, I'm doing this, or I'm going here, or I met this person, or I'm doing that. None of that happened. She vanished without a trace. You heard from the medical examiner, Dr. Carol Terry. You saw these heartbreaking photographs of how this defendant dumped and left her body in the woods. Not there. Didn't even dig her a grave. Dropped her body in the woods and left her there for animals to take. To eat her flesh. Her family for 196 days. No funeral that they got together. For 196 days. No even knowledge of where she was. If she was alive. If she was kidnapped and being held somewhere. If she was anything. He callously left her body here. You heard about the autopsy. Testimony from Detective Carter and from Dr. Terry. They'd never, ever seen a teenager dumped in the woods naked and it wasn't a homicide. Not one time. Dr. Terry, over 30 years of being a forensic pathologist, over, I think she said 6,400, but it might be more than that, autopsies she's conducted, including numerous ones with skeletal remains. The experience that she has is unparalleled. In DeKalb County, in Fulton County, in Gwinnett County, and across the metro Atlanta area. Never seen it. Ever. And what she did tell me was that she was very suspicious of this being homicidal violence based on the circumstances of what happened. A 16-year-old girl ending up naked in the middle of the woods in Decula, Georgia, on the side of Highway 316. No way to get there, no messages, no anything. That this is a homicide. She said, I have to be consistent. I didn't find skeletal trauma, so I can't say homicide. I just can't say the word homicide. But it's very suspicious of homicidal violence. There's no way she could have gotten out there to her location. And what's more, and you'll hear yet again here in a moment, the defendant definitively told you this wasn't an accident. If you recall, in the interview that he gave, he foreclosed every single theory, reasonable theory that Ms. Drake is trying to convince you was reasonable. He said it didn't happen. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't an overdose. It wasn't some opiate. It wasn't that. He told you in the interview it wasn't an accident. And what's also interesting, 3.5 hours of hearing from detectives about how his gun is found feet away from Susana Morales, the missing 16-year-old girl. He came into play completely dumb, but we all know that's a complete fabrication. He had done research on her for the entire 196 days. So he knew exactly everything that was going on, despite playing dumb to the detectives. He never asked one time how she died. He never said, was she shot with my gun? My gun's out there. It's because he knows how she died. Dr. Terry told you, it is particularly suspicious of strangulation. And that's relevant because the DNA, they didn't find DNA in the truck, right? If she had been shot or stabbed in the truck or before and put in the truck, there'd probably be blood everywhere, and you can't hide that. If she had overdosed, there'd be vomit. They found no traces of that, right? It's based on all of that, Dr. Terry told you, extremely suspicious of strangulation, of an asphyxial form of death, strangulation. We found the defendant's gun. You see the photographs. You have the gun. It's his serial number, reported stolen that night. The next night. This is him.
So yesterday, I don't know what time, man. I went running around here. I did a bunch of stuff yesterday. And I came back, I went to the store and everything. I had it at the store, and I came back, I went running everything, and then my girl was finna leave. I was like, I got my wallet. I don't know where my wallet at. So I can't find my wallet. And then this morning, I worked Doorville. I was getting my dry cleaner. I got to work tonight. And then I looked on my floorboard, and the my Glock 19 holster is on the floorboard. And my Glock 19 is always together, you know?
Right.
So, oh, I hate to say, I think I left my door. They ain't smashed the window or nothing. I fucked around, left my door.
A police officer sworn to tell the truth, to uphold the law, wears a badge, has the responsibilities and obligations that come with that. But yet, he's standing there telling another police officer a complete lie, an absolute fabrication. That he left his doors unlocked and somebody came and took his gun. And you don't even have to think hard about that one because Ms. Drake told you that's a complete lie. But he is standing there to another law enforcement officer. This isn't some just last minute cover-up. This is him making significant conscious decisions to lie and cover up and create some elaborate tale of what happened that night. This is at 10:30 approximately in the morning, July 27th. And what's important about that? At 9:35, he is in the woods. Less than an hour before he makes this report, he's in the woods looking for the gun. He's out there trying to find it as he dropped it. 9:43, he's already headed back at this point to his apartment complex. By 9:43, he's driving back on 316 past Lawrenceville. Goes directly back to his apartment and calls the police to report the gun stolen. Innocent people don't do that. Innocent people don't call the police and make up wild allegations. There's this line in his interview where he's, I wouldn't do this because I wouldn't want to jeopardize my career. That is complete nonsense. Every piece of evidence you've seen in this case is the defendant making a conscious decision not to torch his career. He doesn't care. He wants to use the badge. He wants to use the uniform to do whatever he wants to do to victimize women. That is the defendant. At 10:30, less than an hour after being in the woods, comes back and calls the Gwinnett County Police Department and sits there, cold and calculated, talking to Officer Merkley. You watch the whole video. Oh, I want to come work for Gwinnett County. Maybe I'll put in a thing, and they're just shooting the breeze. Like nothing ever happened. Absolutely nothing. It's unimaginable. This is at 10:30 in the morning. We're talking about 9 hours before this. He is in the woods dumping a lifeless, naked 16-year-old girl in the woods, and yet 9 hours later he is standing there, just as fine as can be. It didn't affect me. You know what? I'm going to cover up the gun stuff too. And they were absolutely right in his interview. He did it because he knew that if they ever found the gun and he hadn't reported it stolen, he'd be prime suspect number one. But Detective Carter told you it almost worked, right? Because when they found the gun and they ran it and it had been stolen, they thought maybe it was the same person who did it, right? Maybe somebody broke into the apartment complex in his car, took the gun, and kidnapped Susanna. Right? That was his plan, his calculated, manipulative decisions in order to mislead everybody who might look into his case. And 9 hours later, despite having carried her life or drugged her lifeless body through the woods and dropped it there, he's fine as can be, talking about coming to working for Gwinnett County. Coming to working for, he's at Doraville. He's at the Doraville Police Department, where the chief got him a job. Because he knows the chief and played basketball with him. But just as fine as can be. It was last night, I was going around, I was going to the store, and then I don't know what happened to it. I had it last night when I was at the store. No. That's a complete lie. All of this is complete fabrication by the defendant. He lied about his wallet being stolen. For the life of me, the same day he reported it, he used his bank card in McDonald's to buy McDonald's. And again, another red herring. Maybe it could have been Apple Pay. No, it's not Apple Pay. Detective Carter told me. She got the same bank account. It doesn't show up this way. He used his bank card. You saw Officer Viat in his body camera video in January 2023. He had his wallet. He had his military ID. He had his police ID. He had all of his cards. He had his bank cards. You saw he never went to replace his driver's license. He's a police officer. You're going to have a driver's license. You know the law. You can't be driving around without a driver's license. You have to have it on your person. Never asked for a new driver's license. Ever. Complete lies about all of it. His phone records. What they do show is that night when Susanna was taken and kidnapped, he was in the exact same area. Same tower, same sector, he's there. Yet, a few hours later, he's in the woods with her body. Her phone's not there. Her phone is back at where it was left and thrown out of the vehicle. You heard this phone call to Esmeralda. He blocked his phone number, his work phone number, his City of Doraville police-issued phone number to call one of the main witnesses in the case to Susanna's disappearance, Esmeralda, her best friend. And he blocked, and just so that we can be sure, that is working correctly, he calls his own personal phone seconds before to test it out, to make sure that it is working and that Star 67 is blocking his phone number. He doesn't identify himself as a police officer. He doesn't identify himself as a courtesy officer. He doesn't identify who he is or why he's interested. He just calls up Susanna's best friend to pry into what the police know and what's going on with the case. Because this is July 30th. This is 3 days after he murdered her and dumped her body in the woods. That he is calling Esmeralda. As they're posting the flyers, anyone with information, please help. He didn't offer his help. He didn't offer his assistance. He didn't say, let me help look for her. Because he knew where she was. Because he had killed her and brought her out to the woods and left her body there. He called to cover his tracks. He wanted to know what the police already knew, or what the investigation showed, or whether they had found anything. And he's covering his tracks. You saw the download of cell phones. How long does it take a body to decompose? Those are the searches that he's making in his phone. For 196 days, not offering any help in finding her, not telling anybody where she's at, not doing any of that. He's searching for how long does it take a body to decompose. He's researching over and over and over again. Gwinnett County News and unsolved murders and Gwinnett teen found. Right? Those are the searches that he's doing. Right? They can stand up here and try to convince you of whatever now, but his own words, his own typing and texting into his phone shows what he's doing during this period of time. Not only that, he is spending a lot of time tracking his own girlfriend. GPS trackers, how to plug them into CRV to her car. He's using the flock, which I'll show you here in a minute, to search for Synovia. The overwhelming majority of 845 searches, overwhelming majority. He's sitting in his police car, or his truck, and he is tracking Synovia. He is looking for cell tower maps and Verizon towers, wanting to know what towers are going to document his locations during this period of time. You saw here, again, searches for Channel 2 Gwinnett. How are you identified by dental records? Days after her body's found. Days after. He's looking up cameras, traffic cameras. Did somebody catch me? Did some camera see me? He made a lot of searches for QT. You saw them in the record. I mean, just scrolling at this record after record of looking at maps that based on QTs and different Q. Yet, right after he does that, he comes into court or into the interview and plays dumb about QT. Well, I don't know which one I was at. Maybe it was this one. And I don't know. He had researched everything. He already knew that they were coming. At some point, if somebody found the gun, they were going to come talk to him. And he had already done all of that looking. What is particularly interesting here is his Google records. July 28th. And that one is a day and a half, 2 days after Susanna's disappearance. Gwinnett County unsolved murders. He's not searching for Gwinnett County unsolved accidental deaths, Gwinnett County overdose deaths, Gwinnett County this or that. He's searching for Gwinnett County unsolved murders. He's also on the same night, hours after he dumped her body there, naked, searching for flock. Going through flock, and as you saw, those records can put you places. Those license plate readers can put you places. And he starts researching. At that time, that's at 4:48 in the morning on July 27th. That's just a matter of hours after he was in the woods. Right after her body is discovered, he starts trying to look up or look at the P2P data sharing. Right as he's searching for all of these other things. This was particularly interesting. A news story unrelated in every way to Susanna's death about a different woman who was found in the woods dead. And a Duluth man being arrested for a 19-year-old woman found in the woods. And immediately after reading that police story, or that news story, he pulls up his city-issued laptop, pulls up Google Maps, and looks right where he dumped her body. And he's researching that whole area. Scrolling around, you saw, hundreds and hundreds of map points there as he's researching the entire area where he left her body, minutes after finding this news story. You saw the flock records. On July 31st, 4 days after he dumped her body in the woods, he's running his own license plate. His own truck license plate. He's using police resources, yet again, in an unauthorized way. He's not allowed to do this. But yet he's searching his own, and then he used that to stalk Sylvia, to track her, to know where she's at, to use police resources to track his girlfriend. I want to talk to you just very briefly about his intent and his motive. There is a charge in there, in the charges that you're going to get, that says that the state doesn't have to prove motive. It's not an element of murder. Motive is not an element. Motive is the why. Why did he do it? Why did he kill her? I may have to go my entire life without knowing the answer. And I don't have an answer about exactly what was going through his mind that night. But we have some really good clues as to what it was. The defense wants you to believe that the defendant, some other explanation other than he cold-blooded murdered Susanna. Maybe there's something else, despite not being able to point at any evidence of that. They want you to believe that. And we're talking about less than 24 hours after Susanna has disappeared. And even less than that, 19 hours after he's in the woods, dumping her body, after he murdered her, he is back on shift as a Doraville police officer. Nobody knows. He's the only one, right? And he's not sitting there contemplating life, and he's not sitting there thinking about, man, I can't believe that just happened. That was crazy, something horrible, terrible. 16-year-old girl is dead, and now she's naked in the woods, and I dumped her body there. No. He walked into QT, and with his badge and his gun and his uniform, goes up to the manager of QT and asks to borrow her phone. But he didn't borrow it to look at his Chase bank account. He started going through her personal, intimate, hidden folders and texting himself videos of her masturbating. Less than 24 hours. The same day. Earlier that same day, he is in the woods with Susanna's naked body. Naked. 16-year-old girl. He doesn't even wait a full day. Not even one full day to go and steal sexual videos of another completely innocent woman. Susanna was murdered. Left there. And instead of showing any form of remorse, showing any signs of this being accidental or something else being responsible, he doubles down on his sexual deviancy and goes and steals sexual videos from Yesenia Lincoln. And she testified to you, and I felt bad that she had to get on the stand and watch that in front of you. Those are her private, personal videos. And he thought nothing else about going into her phone and violating her privacy. You heard about Alicia Bates. That's a police officer, y'all. Police officer, a National Guard member, wearing his military uniform, saying that, oh, she invited him over. You can see at the end of this, that door handle remains stuck in a down position. He tried to push the door open so hard that that door handle wouldn't even return to an upright position. He tried to break into Alicia Bates' apartment. December 10th, 2022. This is after Susanna. This is 5 months after he's left her there and her body has been rotting in the woods. He's stalking Elisha Bates. He wants you to believe that.
Well, maybe there was some. Where are the text messages?
You have. There's them right there. Y'all can look at them.
Elisha didn't invite him over.
In fact, you got to see a screenshot from October 15th of 2022. It's in there.
Go look at it and pull it up. October 15, 2022. There's some text messages between the two of them.
And that's the one where he says, "Hey, are you home? Let's link up. Let's hang out. I'll be around that area in a little bit. Right? I'm going to be there in a little bit." He had already been there. There's a screenshot of him there an hour before. He showed up unannounced to her apartment. When she wasn't there, he waited around and then texted her an hour later, "Hey, are you going to be around? I'm going to be in that area in a while." No, he was already there. You heard the 911 calls from Elisha, terrified, whispering that she's there with her boyfriend and a gun to defend herself. And why? Because the police never showed up. They never came out there when she called. She told you, they called me, but they didn't even send a car. Right? You heard the dispatcher on the phone, didn't believe her. Right? What? And that's interesting. The dispatcher didn't believe her. This doesn't make any sense. It's something else they're not telling me. Right? It doesn't make any sense. Why a uniformed police officer, a officer with a Doraville Police Department, a SWAT member, a National Guard member, would be stalking and harassing this young woman. She didn't invite him over. She didn't lead him on. There are no messages to that. She provided the messages between them. He keeps contacting her and wanting to hang out. And then after all of this is said and done, after he shows up, after the police are called, even the second time now she's called the police, and even after that, what does he do? He uses his police access for GCIC on his laptop to go in and pull Elisha Bates's information. Something that he cannot do. It is a violation of the law to do. He doesn't care about the law. He doesn't care about the law in any way. He said in his interview, "I don't like thieves. That's the kind of crime I want to investigate." He is a thief. He steals girls' photographs. He steals their personal identifying information. And he uses his police resources to do it. There's a statement he made in his interview, "I wouldn't do that. I have morals." No, sir, you don't. He doesn't have morals.
He's not a moral man.
He's not a good man.
He's not a good officer. He's not a good National Guard member. He's evil. He's a monster and a predator.
And he uses his badge and his uniform to do it.
Why is Susanna found naked?
There is absolutely no reason on planet Earth that she should be naked. There's no evidence that she knew and or would ever voluntarily spend time with the defendant, talk to the defendant, have sex with the defendant, hook up with him. She is on her road, steps from her house, before she is snatched up off the street and ends up dead, completely naked. Michael Jones told you.
He told you when he got his evidence in the case,
Went through the evidence. You've seen boxes. We've had boxes. There's been files. There's stacks of evidence. There's all kinds of things.
when he got that and he started looking through it, came out of his cell, Michael Jones, and the only comment he had to say was, they can't connect me to the body because they didn't find my blood or semen on her. I'm sorry, what? You didn't find your blood or semen on her? Who says that? Who says that they didn't find my semen on her if you didn't rape her? If there's no chance of it being on there, why would it be on his mind? It makes absolutely no sense. The reality is, Susanna's a beautiful 16-year-old girl, and the defendant, who has a problem with preying on women, young women, beautiful women, snatched her off the street and raped her and dumped her body and killed her. And his only comment is that we can't tie him to the body because there's no blood or semen. Ms. Drake told you that the defendant came, or that Mr. Jones came forward before his sentencing on escape. And she's trying to convince you that maybe he had some kind of ulterior motive. That is a lie. Or maybe just a misstatement or misremembrance. I watched it again last night. Mr. Jones said, precisely, when she asked him, did you contact the DA's office before or after your escape? He said after. That's what he said. He had nothing to gain. He had nothing to... And again, Ms. Drake even asked him, well, are you hoping that something's going to happen? What was his answer? Nobody's going to do anything for me. What did he say about me? Mr. Delphine has never offered me a single thing, offered to help me in any way. Mr. Jones has got no involvement in this case. He is absolutely, in every way, unrelated as a non-party. He just so happened to know the defendant in the jail. And the defendant confided in him information that we can't tie him to the body because we don't have his blood or his semen. And then says, when and if I go to prison. When I go to prison. What's it like? They talk about the death penalty. And it says, this is the only one they've got me charged with. The defendant's own statements, his own state of mind in the jail, is that he's going to get convicted because he did this. His own state of mind is, can I get the death penalty for this? Because I did this. Right? And when he sees the evidence, is excited that we can't tie him to the body because he sat there for 196 days not saying anything to anybody, and we couldn't get any DNA or semen. His story, this is what was said in opening. You're going to hear from Miles Bryant. He's going to explain to you exactly what happened. You're going to know the full truth, why Mr. Miles lied to the police and why he reported his gun stolen. That's what was said to you in opening. What you heard was, I have morals, I wouldn't do that. What you heard is that the defendant murdered Susanna. You heard from him in his interview.
Did she try to rob you? You did say, listen, just hear me out, okay? When I tell you I got your back, trust me, okay? You said your holster's in the passenger seat because we've been playing this forever. We got this information last week, but we haven't come and run up on you because we're not worried. We don't think, you know what I'm saying? The holster is in your passenger seat floorboard. Did Susanna try to take it?
No. I literally never seen it.
Susanna didn't try to rob him.
This is the moment where you're like, okay, yes, I fucked up. That's not what I'm supposed to do. That's not what was supposed to happen. Her and I were together. I know you're stressed out. I'm not going to go tell Dorva you were smoking weed. So you went out there with her to smoke weed and she had bad weed. You know what I'm saying?
I never smoked weed. None, that time, nothing.
Okay.
God, this looks bad.
God, this looks bad. Yes, it does. Here.
Were you trying to help her and she was already dead when you found her?
No.
She wasn't already dead when you found her.
You were involved with her? She's 16. I don't give a fuck what y'all had going on. You talked about all these side pieces you had. Yeah. If you had a side piece with her, cool. Just tell us that.
No.
Okay.
No.
He tells you so?
Did your girlfriend kill her?
No.
Could
Your girlfriend see her and then lose her shit and kill her, then she goes like, oh fuck, my girlfriend just killed her, let me go dump this body out in the woods.
No.
Reality is, the defendant, during his interview, you heard from him. You heard his statements. His version of events to you, the jury, is that he didn't know her. He had never seen her. She was never in his truck. He didn't dump her in the woods. He didn't drop his gun. He didn't do any of those things. Right? Given every opportunity to explain and give some reasonable explanation, no, she didn't rob me. No, she didn't die of an overdose. No, Zenobia didn't kill her. She wasn't already dead when I found her. He has answered those questions for you. They are not reasonable. He said that she was never in his truck.
I I literally was by myself. You talk to my girlfriend. When she came up to the front of my truck, stuff like that, nobody was in my truck.
She wasn't there with you.
Who?
Your girlfriend wasn't there with you out there on 316.
No, but when she came at the apartment complex stuff, nobody was in my truck.
Nobody was in his truck.
Well, that's an obvious lie. Mr. Drake's already told you he's guilty of the false report of a crime. What does that mean? It means he lied about his gun being taken out of his truck. Well, what does that mean? That means he dropped it in the woods. It had a light on it, and he dropped it in the woods, using it as a flashlight. And if he's out there in the woods with his gun at Susanna's body, then he left her there. He dumped her naked body there. You can follow the bouncing ball. It's not hard. His says she was never in his truck. That's an obvious lie. He drove his truck out there with her dead body in it and dumped her out in the woods.
I mean, you were in the woods, literally over her dead body. How do you not see that?
Your gun was right there, dude.
I was out there with her bones and with your gun. Literally just looking, wow, look at that.
We consider ourselves good detectives, but a lot of times we don't. A lot of times we don't find the gun.
Yeah, I can't.
But when the gun is sitting right there, it's right there.
You want to see a picture of your gun? I took a picture where it was sitting in the woods. There it is. Not buried, not thrown, not hidden. Just sitting there with natural pine straw falling on top like you mistakenly dropped it.
He told you, I didn't make a false report of a crime.
You know, and even as we looked into my car got broken into. You know, when people go grabbing door handles because you left your truck unlocked, right?
Yeah.
What do? They grab hundreds of door handles. Guess how many entering autos happened that night?
No.
Just yours. 0.
So you said yourself earlier, your complex gets hit all the time.
Yeah.
Multiple people.
Nope.
How is it just convenient for you that your truck is the only one that gets broken into in the back of the complex? We're not stopping at any other building along the way. They're going straight to Miles's truck, and that's it.
Understand.
Because that was a false report of a crime.
It was not.
Because you dropped your gun in the woods.
No, I didn't.
I think you were using your weapon light as a flashlight to figure out where you're going to dump her.
No. I have plenty of flashlights. I don't know. I wouldn't even do that.
Yet, here today, you heard the exact opposite of that. You heard, oh, he did do that. He made a false report of crime. They said, no, I didn't. Mr. Drake told you, yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. And it's obvious. And which is why she said it. Because to stand up here and say he didn't in the face of the overwhelming, monumental evidence that he did is just absurd. Right? So, I get the defense strategy, right? I've got to stand up here and admit what I have to because it's undeniable, but then try to convince you that everything else is a lie, right? That everything else in the case is a lie. The one thing that is, the 100%, I'll admit that. But the rest of it, try to mislead you that that's not true, right? That maybe some mystery thing happened that there's no evidence for. The defendant told you.
Well, you have some part. You have some sort of part in it. There's no other way you can have all this on this incident. There's no other way unless you have a part in it.
I have no part in it.
It's impossible.
That's a bold-faced lie.
He also told you he didn't even know where Susanna lived.
Do you know where, Susanna didn't live in your complex, but do you know kind of where she lived?
From what I've seen, she lived nearby.
Like where?
I have no clue. She said it said she was walking home, and I don't know. She said she's nearby, so I guess it'd be in the area. I don't think she lived in that apartment complex though.
And Ms. Drake brought up the fact in that previous clip, he slips up. He slips up and says, she said that she lived nearby. And as evidence for, they must have had a conversation. And I didn't say that they did. Ms. Drake said, in order to kidnap somebody, you just got to snatch them up out of the car, off the street. You just got to stop your truck and violently drag them into your vehicle. No, you don't. Did he offer her a ride to her house? I don't know. Right? There's no evidence of that. Did he talk to her? We don't know. There's no evidence of that. Right? What we do know is that once he encountered her, she never saw the light of day again. He snatched her up at some point and drove off with her, threw her phone out of the window, and killed her and dropped her lifeless body in the woods. That's what we know. And that there's no other reasonable explanation for his conduct that night. I created a list of the defendant's lies, and I had to create a list because there were so many. I couldn't count them on my hands. So I wrote them down. I didn't go into the woods. That's lie number one. I didn't stand over her body. That's a lie. I didn't drop my gun. That's a lie. My truck was broken into. That's a lie. My truck was unlocked. That's a lie. My holster was on the floor and wasn't, somebody took the gun out of my holster. That's a lie. My wallet was taken. That's a lie. I never got out of my truck. That's a lie. We showed you the physical activity sensors on his phone. As Susanna is walking home and disappears, he's walking around. He told the police he spent the entire night in the truck. He said he drove around all night. He even said when he was doing reports later at the QT, he was sitting in his vehicle. Never said he got out of his vehicle. Not one time. On the side of Highway 316, sitting in his vehicle. Yet hour after hour after hour, it shows him walking. And it shows him traveling hundreds of meters. Consistent with him dragging a body through the woods in the middle of Tequila from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. on the 27th. From midnight to 1 a.m. on the 27th. He is moving. He is not sitting in his vehicle. As Susanna is walking home at 10 p.m., he gets out of his vehicle and he is walking around. He is a liar. He did not stay in his vehicle. No one was in my truck. That's a lie. My license was stolen. That's a lie. I called police when I found my wallet. No, he didn't. Detective Carter told you there isn't a single call to the police department documenting that he ever reported he found his wallet. Moreover, he said in the interview, well, I lost Officer Merkley's card. I don't know what happened to it. They found it in his truck. When they searched it, right there. Officer Merkley's business card with the case number for the stolen report. He didn't lose it. He didn't want to call. He didn't call. That's a lie. I didn't dump her body. That's a lie. I wouldn't jeopardize my career. Obviously a lie. I didn't throw her phone out of the window. That's a lie. I didn't make a false report. That's a lie. I didn't know that girl. He obviously is lying. He picked her up that night and killed her. I've never seen her. I had nothing to do with this. Nothing happened between us. I don't know where she lived. I wasn't in front of her house. Yes, he was. His vigilant records show him parked right at the next door of her house. Stopped, stationary, parked a month after her disappearance in front of her mother's house. As her mother still didn't know where she was, he is out there, stopped in front of their house. And they told you when they testified, we saw a black truck, they would come back and around there, and he's parked there. My personal phone was dead. Why'd you use your work phone? Well, my personal phone was dead. Garbage. It's a lie. It wasn't dead. He used it all night long. It maps him everywhere. He's calling people on it. That's a lie. I didn't take her clothes. Where are they? They're not with her. He disposed of her clothes. He threw them away. Did something with them to obscure the crime, not be found. I didn't try to break into Alicia's house. That's a lie. I wasn't stalking Alicia. That's a lie. I didn't hide my face. We just watched the video. Police officer, military man, walking past her apartment with his hand like this over his face, trying to open her door. It's lie after lie after lie, but yet he sits there and they are asking you to believe them now. Sergeant Poppy said it best. If you can't tell us now what happened, how is any jury going to believe you? You can't get up here at trial. You can't argue stuff now when justice is about to be served upon you that none of this happened and that there's other possibilities. He was given every opportunity. He was given every measure to explain if anything else happened. He did not. He sat and lied after lie after lie after lie. He has never told the truth, and he's not telling the truth now. They are not being truthful to you. Susana Morales was murdered. There's no other explanation. Nothing else makes sense. She didn't know him. She wouldn't get into the car with him. She wouldn't have sex with him. How did she end up naked in the woods? There is a principle that I talked about, Occam's razor. It means the simplest answer is usually the right one. In this case, there is a simple answer. There is a simple answer as to what happened. And I'll tell you, the defendant had already thought about doing this. You saw these videos.
Something was happening to you. We're doing a rape or a missing person, then we find your body out there in the woods. Then what? Because I know you're probably strong and you're smart and you know say no to strangers and stuff like that. But nowadays people don't care. People are my size, big, and just come snatch you up. You can scream, you can shout all you want. They're gonna throw you in the back of the van and go take you, and your parents will never see you again. And there's nothing you can do. You can't fight it. I mean, you're strong. I promise you. I bet you're strong, but you're not that strong.
Yeah, I know.
There's people that's bigger than me out there. See how bad this can go? Say you was over there with your friends here. Your friend mom knew because she said her kid can go. You get raped and killed, stuff like that. Well, she was the last person to know. So now we're all in her, talking to her like, unless you've been 13 under the age of 16, you're not even old enough to consent. See what I'm saying? I know I'm getting kind of, out of the balance, stuff like that, but you're not even old enough to consent for sex yet. You're under 16. You know what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying, though, you know?
Yeah.
I'm being real with you because I don't want you to go out here and get hurt.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you another phone. What if you was out there and something happened, you need to call, you can't. You just can scream, and then they cover your mouth up.
2 months before the defendant kidnapped and murdered Susana Morales, he had this conversation with a missing 13-year-old girl in Doraville. And the obvious fixation that he has with kidnapping, and it's not just, somebody might hurt you, somebody might harm you. It is somebody might snatch you up, put you into a van, kidnap you, drive you into the woods, rape you, and murder you. That's what he said. 2 months before, he did exactly that. He picked up Susana Morales. He kidnapped her. He took her against her will. To make sure nobody could find her, he threw her phone out of the window. He then threw her in the back of the truck, drove out to Decula, where he raped and murdered her and left her in the woods. And you can hear it from his own mouth. This was not something he hadn't thought about, something that hadn't occurred to him. The reality is that the defense told you that you're going to think he is the most callous, uncaring coward that you have ever seen. And I suspect that's true. And asked you to hold him guilty and responsible for the death of Suzanne Morales. That's what the defense asked you to do. I'm also asking you to do that. There is no reasonable explanation. There isn't one that makes sense based on your common sense. When you look at this evidence, when you consider what happened the night of July 26th of 2022, the simple answer is the right answer. And you know, and you can see the behavior of the defendant. We don't have to wonder. We've got to see in the trial. Obsessed with stealing videos from this girl's phone. Obsessed with stalking his own girlfriend, monitoring her, watching her with hidden cameras. Obsessed with showing up at another girl's home who is not dating, trying to break into her apartment, coming back multiple times, over and over again, using his police resources to stalk women, using his police resources to stalk Elisha, his own girlfriend. They told you. Zenobia and Avion told you. He's a master manipulator. He comes up with excuses for everything. Right? Time after time we confront him. Well, what about this? What about that? And there was always some excuse. There was always some little thing that he would give them to make them think that, okay, maybe he's telling the truth. But time after time after time, every time he was lying, living double lives. He is a master manipulator. He is a liar, but don't let him manipulate you. There is no evidence that anything other than he murdered Suzanne Morales that night, that he kidnapped her, that he threw her phone out of the car, raped and murdered her, and left her in the woods. I'm asking you to do your job. Asking you to look at the evidence, to use your common sense, and to see through the manipulations and the lies and the red herrings and all of the other distractions that they're trying to throw at you, and look at the case and hold him guilty for the death of Suzanne Morales, which is malice murder. He intended to kill her. He took her, he snatched her up, and almost immediately threw her phone out the window. That makes no sense. No version that they've attempted to present to you, no other alternative, explains that. It can't explain that. Which is why they didn't mention it. Because it cannot be explained. Why is her phone thrown out of the window? That makes no sense. How does she end up naked if this isn't murder? You've heard from all of her friends and who she was. She's not getting into his truck. She's not having sex with him that night. That didn't happen. She didn't want to do that. That's not her character. She was walking home, steps away from her house, and her life was altered like that because the defendant is a monster. He's a predatory monster with a badge. I'm asking you to hold him accountable. I'm asking you to find him guilty. Find him guilty on malice murder. Find him guilty on felony murder. He kidnapped her and she ended up dead. We know that. That's indisputable. She is dead in the woods because of this defendant and his felonious actions. Count 3, kidnapping, he did take her. It was against her will. He didn't use lawful authority. And during that, she got injured. She got killed. Criminal attempt to commit rape, because there is no semen left at the scene. We had to charge criminal attempt. I would have loved to have been able to charge it for his rape. But I'm stuck with the fact that he let her stay out there for 196 days and for her flesh to rot off her bones so that nothing could be done. And no traces of the forensic evidence could be gotten. Count 5, false report of a crime. Already admitted that one.
But even despite that, it's overwhelmingly obvious that he lied about that and that he is the one responsible. There is no one else. There's nobody else to hold accountable. There's nobody else involved. There's no evidence of anyone else involved. There's nothing. It's solely the defendant in this case. And I'm asking you to hold him accountable for what he did, which is kidnapping, murdering Susana Morales.